Hello, and welcome to today's presentation, brought to you by the Life Sciences team here at ReadTech. We're going to start off with a poll question, just so we can learn more about you as everybody files in. And let me get that launched for you. So you should see on your screen our poll question: what is basic UDI used for? Is it A, to identify a device in UDIMED, B, to link the device to technical documents, C, necessary for communication with European authorities, or D, all of the above? Just a note, organizers and panelists don't vote.
It looks like a trick question, Sam.
I know, it does look, it is, I think it might be. But so far our audience seems to be doing well with it.
All right, cool.
All right, I'm gonna let that trickle in for just another moment. Okay, I'm gonna close the poll and share the results. It looks like 93% of our audience so far has gotten all the above, which is correct. Thank you so much for participating. Let me share my screen. Thank you so much again. Now we'll move on to our presentation. So pleased to introduce our panelists for today's talk. We've got Ronald Boumans, formerly a senior inspector at the Dutch Competent Authority for Medical Devices, the IGJ, and a senior regulatory consultant at Emergo. He now owns his own consulting company, Boumans Regulatory Consulting. He serves as the founder of the PRRC, so many acronyms, Academy. In addition, he serves as the co-founder and consultant at AR2C2 GmbH. And then we have Gary Sainer. He's a subject matter expert on medical device, unique device identification, and other structured content. He's reporting to regulatory agencies and commercial organizations. He has over 30 years of experience in software development, process management, and data administration, with the last 15 years focused on the life sciences industry. He serves as co-chair of the industry structured product labeling technical team and on the advisory board of the medical devices group. So in this, our third installment, Gary, if you could go to the next slide, of our Ask the Expert series, we're going to cover more information about a basic UDI, followed by an interactive question and answer session. So please do bring lots of questions. We've got lots of emphasis on that this time. We want to have a lively conversation. We will cover as many questions as we can during this session. And then if we don't get to one, our team of experts will respond to any questions retroactively after the recording. This meeting is being recorded, just so you know, so we are going to be sending it out to everyone. We do encourage questions, so please submit them at any time using the question box. We'll be answering them during the presentation, so after a short intro, we're going to go right into that. If you have any technical difficulties, feel free to send me a message or email me, and after the meeting, we're going to send out these slides. If you are having problems with the audio through your computer, please try calling the phone number listed in the email invite or on the screen by clicking on the phone icon. Again, we'll be sending these out to you after the presentation. So I'm Sam Page. Please reach out to me with any questions directly now or following the presentation, and I will hand it over to Gary and Ronald at this point.
Well, thank you, Sam. This is going to be interesting interaction. Hopefully spend bulk of the time with our live questions coming in. There's some frequently asked questions that we might revert to only if necessary. But Ronald and I were talking in the beginning, preparing for this particular webinar, and we thought it would just take, just 3 or 4 minutes here in the front end to go over some of the basic principles of European Union basic UDI and just level set all the conversation going forward. So I'm going to work my way through just a couple slides here in the beginning, and then Sam will open up the floor. keep an eye on all those questions that come in, and Ronald and I will be on hand to answer some of those questions as we go forward. So just to recap, you might be familiar with this. We covered it in some of the earlier series, but for those that might be attending for the first time, we want to make sure you understand what we will be referring to. This basic UDI-DI is simply a group identifier for very similar medical devices. So it's like a family name, if you will. So that particular identifier, we'll call it a parent, has to have at least one child. So when you do identify a basic UDI-DI, it does have to have one device connected to it, but it can have multiples. It can have 20, 50, 100. Technically it could have 1,000 different devices, all part of that particular basic UDI-DI group. Now, for every individual device, it has to have one and only one parent. So you can't have a particular device sitting in two different groups. So there are some rules about how you create this. Ronald has spent a lot of good time going over some of the scoping of that particular basic UDI. I know it's always a challenge, but some things to remember there would be that the intended purpose, the risk class, the essential design and manufacturing characteristics, and the certification, all those have to be the same for every device in the group. And then in addition to that, there are some attributes that are reported into UDIMED, and we'll touch on those in just a second. But all those particular attributes have to have the same value for each device in that particular group. Now, how do you go about creating this? The burden is on the actual manufacturer to create this basic UDI-DI. Each of the standards, GS1, HIBIC, ICC, BBA, and IFA, I know it's a alphabet soup there, but each of those issuing entities have guidelines on how you create this particular value. European Union has put some limits on that, 25 characters maximum. It has to have a check digit. Now, the other thing that we want to remember is that basic UDI is created for MDR and IVDR devices. So those medical devices that comply with regulation and those in vitro diagnostic devices that comply with regulation will have to have a basic UDI-DI. You might have heard the term UDIMED-DI or UDIMED-ID. Those particular terms are only for legacy devices, and there's not a grouping concept for legacy devices. The UDIMED-DI is one-to-one for a UDIMED-ID. So if there's questions about that, go ahead and pose those. But we'll be spending most of our time today on basic UDI-DI, which has to do with regulatory devices. We won't go into the attributes connected to a basic UDI-DI, but this is the list. They're grouped around some information about the model, some information about the organization. You should have received your single registration number for your manufacturer by now. If you're non-European based, you'll have to have an authorized rep. That entity will also have an SRN. There's a number of fields about regulatory, and then on the right-hand side, you see a number of characteristics. So this, the second grouping there would be appropriate for medical device, and the third group down in the bottom that would be for in vitro diagnostic. But all those answers and all these values that you see would have to be the same for every device that inside medical device basic UDI-DI. I know a lot of you use GS1 as the issuing entity, so we're just going to take just a couple seconds here to take a look at the actual construction. There are some helps out on the GS1 website. You can go to their general spec and search GMN. GS1 uses global model number, GMN, as their term for a basic UDI-DI. Don't get confused there. It's really one and the same. It's just a GS1 implementation. I think they use global for all their particular devices and standards, but global model number is the same as basic UDI-DI in GS1 terms. Interesting, GS1 creates 2 check characters. There is a requirement to have at least 1, but they create 2. Not too uncommon. HIBIC also has 2 check characters. And there are some other special scenarios where you can read about the actual construction. It actually has 3 different components in a GMN. So the first component you're familiar with being your GS1 company prefix. No additional cost to create GMN, by the way, once you have a subscription to GS1 and have a company prefix. So this is another use of that particular term. Then what you will create is something brand new, a model reference, and this points to the particular basic UDI-DI group. You can use large case, lowercase, numbers, special characters, pretty wide open there as to how you identify that. And then there's 2 check characters at the end. But there's never a barcode that is created. So this particular instance for information only, you'll never see a basic UDI on the actual product label itself. So as a real quick comparison between a basic UDI-DI and what you were very familiar with, maybe a G1014, for example, for a UDI-DI, you see the GS1 company prefix is repeated, but the indicator digit is not present in the GMN. The item reference that you're familiar with in a G1014 is replaced in concept by the model reference number. It's not one and the same. These are 2 different identifiers. And you know that the check digit is a single digit in the G10 construct, and all numbers. Whereas when you look at the GMN, you do have the possibility of putting some letters in there to help you identify that. And then obviously this presentation in either 1-dimensional, 2-dimensional barcode would actually appear on the label. All right, so let's look at a quick example. Let's say that you're a company that manufactures forceps and you create this particular identifier. In this particular example, the numbers are all for a company prefix, and my forceps happens to be the particular identifier that I used, and then 59 would be the 2 check characters. So inside this grouping, you might put one of your real common basic products, the forceps. Now, it's not uncommon to have multiple forceps in a higher packaging level. So you might put 3 of those in a pouch. You might actually put 2 pouches in a box. So all of those, individual UDI DIs are part of this hierarchy, but there's a single device, the forceps, underneath a basic UDI. Let's say you also have in your portfolio forceps that have an extra long end to them and for extra reach or whatever, and you have a different item reference. In fact, this is 01, this is 02 down here for a different particular model or version. And it doesn't stop there. This is just illustrative purposes only. Maybe you have another version that has a locking feature on it, and it has its own item reference number, and it could have packaging levels connected to it. But obviously, check digit needs to be updated, and it goes on and on and on. Now, that is what you will eventually have in place when you create your basic UDI and assign, in this particular examples, I have 3 or more particular forceps inside my group. So hopefully that kind of puts a little bit of illustrative, explanation to the concept of basic UDI-DI. And the last thing I'd like to touch on before we get into your live Q&A is where in the world is this basic UDI used? So there's some early requirement if you do need a conformity assessment and working with notified body, you'll have to create your basic UDI prior to actually engaging the notified body. So this is something that you should be working on as of now. There's other places it pops up. It's going to be mentioned in your declaration of conformity, certainly throughout your technical documentation. There's some additional requirements if you have a class 3 or implantable. And then at the time of reporting and registering your device in UDI, we looked at all those values that are part of that entry. And then it pops up other places. So the vigilance module and also the post-marketing surveillance module, there'll be references back to basic UDI. And the last one I'll just touch on here real quickly is if you are exporting your device, then you'll see the basic UDI in your certificate of free sale. So with that, let me move over to the live questions and answers. Sam, I'm going to check with you to see if any questions have come in, and maybe we can get rolling with that. Ronald, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you.
Okay.
If we do indeed have some questions coming in.
All right, let's do it.
Here, just real quickly, if you have some questions to submit, here's a few instructions here. Submit using the question box. We'll be answering them during the webinar. And then again, if we get too many that we can't handle, we'll have some follow-up for you. So just keep them coming. We'll get to you. So our first question, Gary, if you want to turn off the slideshow.
Oh, right. Let's see if we can go back to talking heads here. Stop showing. All right. So I think that now changed. Is that okay?
Yep, we're all good. So here's our first question. If you have multiple products with the same basic UDI number, but not all of them will be registered as IVDR, do those non-IVDR products still need to be in the family with an assigned basic UDI?
Shall I take that?
Sure.
Well, it is about what are you going to do with the devices. If you are going to certify the devices under the IVDR, then you need to have the basic UDI for the devices. It's not the other way around. That basic UDI is there, and then you can select if you want to certify. So if you have devices with the same intended purpose, the same risk class, the same essential design and manufacturing characteristics, they are in the same family, but only you need to assign their basic UDI if they are part of your certification. So if you have UDIs that are not will not be certified under the IVDR, you can basically the basic UDI is not relevant. You can have a UDI on the label. That's where it gets complex. So later you may add them to the basic UDI, but you can use the same UDI, but they will have a different UDI, of course, because they're different devices. But if they're not certified according to the IVDR, they don't need, they should not have a basic UDI. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I think so. The next question we have coming in is a little complicated, so bear with me. It says, hi, my medical device system consists with 3 medical devices, A, B, and C. B and C devices have the same basic UDI/DI, but A has different basic UDI/DI because technically it is not similar like devices A and B. What basic UDI/DI should be for the system or in this case, the system that don't need basic UDI/DI or need different basic UDI/DI as A, B, and C devices? How do you manage the structure using basic UDI/DI grouping? Did you follow?
Yeah. I mean, let's see. If you combine products within a system, then Article 22 applies. Article 22 is about system and procedure packs, and that means if you have devices with a certain intended purpose, and you assign a more specific intended purpose to a device to use it in a system or procedure pack, then it becomes a system and procedure pack, and then you need to assign a UDI, a basic UDI, to basic system and procedure pack and a UDI to the packaging or the system. And so you have this hierarchy. For example, you have a line and a needle that you want to use for a certain procedure. Now, the line and the needle each have their own basic UDI because they're different devices and their own UDI. And if you say, well, putting that in the same package, you assign a specific use because the needle will then be used specifically together with that line for a specific purpose, which is hopefully allowed within the intended purpose of both the line and the needle. So then you combine them into this procedure pack, and then you have to assign a basic UDI to that procedure pack, and you may have variants like different sizes of needles, different gauges, different lines, but the basic procedure pack will be used for a specific type of procedure. So there you have your basic UDI for the procedure pack and the UDI that goes on the label of this procedure pack. The devices inside the procedure pack need to keep their own labeling because that identifies the device as such and is linked to the basic UDI of each individual device. Let me see if I covered everything. Of course, if you use Article 22, if you rely on that, then you are a system and procedure pack producer, which is a separate economic type of economic operator, and you must have a single registration number for that. So you go to UDI and you want to assign a UDI or a basic UDI to a system and procedure pack. You can only do that if you are a system and procedure pack producer, SPPP. So there you have the whole thing in a nutshell. I hope that works.
Yes, I think that's good. Gary, did you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I think that was good. I know it's always confusing when you have things that are on kind of the fringe, or it's kind of a new scenario. So great answer, Ronald. Thank you.
Yeah, well, there's one thing I can add. Sometimes you have devices that are intended to be used together, right? Then it's not a procedure pack. So you have a device in the intended purpose that says this device is intended to be used together with the other device. Then you're not adding that extra, that tighter intended purpose, that more specific intended purpose to a device. In that case, it's not a system and procedure pack. They're just two independent devices, and you don't need to assign this basic UDI. One example for that is if you have an active device with software, and you can update the software remotely. Now you have this active device, it has a label and a UDI on that. If you update the software and maybe even change the functionality of the software, you would have to relabel the device if you would combine them. But if you say, well, here's the active device, and this is the type of software that needs to run on it, and if you have the software, it is only intended to be run on, to be used on this particular device, but you treat them as two different devices, then the active device does not change if you update the software. But the software, yeah, if it's updated, if it's changed, you can remotely add a new UDI to it. But there, it's not a procedure pack. Of course, if you have active devices that use a set of active devices that use the same software, then okay, then you have this situation where you're creating systems, and then again you are the system and procedure pack producer, and you need to use this higher UDI. It is complex. I know. Sorry. But you can play around with it. That's what I'm saying. If you understand there are certain options, you can play around with it and see what is best for you in your typical situation. And that's what I want to say with this example.
Kind of a choose your own adventure situation.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is, how does basic UDI relate to medicinal product sterilization, e.g. convenience kitting?
So, Ronald, would this be for example, a medicinal product and a medical device? If it's a pure medicinal product, it's not falling into the basic UDI scenario. So maybe we could elaborate a little bit on this, combination of a medicinal device and a medical device. I don't think it has anything to do with the actual serialization, but please go ahead.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, because I got lost a little bit. Sorry.
It says, how does basic UDI relate to medicinal product sterilization?
Medicinal product sterilization, that's just not, it's a medicinal product. It's not, does not have a UDI or a basic UDI. It's not there.
Perfect.
If you have medical devices and you sterilize them, well, it's just part of the concept of the device. So you have the device description. If you look at the attributes that are used in for identification of the basic UDI, one of them is sterilization, if it's sterile or not. If you change from a non-sterile to a sterile device, you need to change the basic UDI. It's a new basic UDI.
Perfect.
So I did have maybe a follow-up question on that. If you go back to some of the criteria for grouping the basic UDI, one of them would be something called manufacturing characteristics. So could someone believe that sterilization or not sterilization, if you provide a product sterile or another item is not sterilized, could that be considered a different manufacturing characteristic?
Yes.
And maybe perhaps involved in the intended purpose? Or anyway, what's the impact there if you take sterilization that far?
Yeah, if sterilization is part of the production characteristics, design and production characteristics, both basically. If you supply a device and it's sterile or non-sterile, it is, I think, quite an essential characteristic of the device.
Mm-hmm. So that would definitely have to be with a medical device. It might cause a second basic UDI to be created, one for non-sterile devices, another for sterile. I think
Yes.
A takeaway there. All right,
And
Sam, do you have another one?
Devices that are placed on the market in both sterile and non-sterile, and you really need to identify them very clearly and make sure they have different UDIs and different basic UDIs. They're just different things. Just think about instructions for use, about using either of these. It will be different. And they may have different intended purposes. Like in some cases, you really need the sterility. In other cases, it's not necessary to have it sterilized. So yeah, it probably has consequences in the intended purpose as well.
Good information. So our next question is, must the same GS1 company prefix be used for the UDI-IDI be used for the basic UDI-IDI?
I don't believe there's any GS1 requirement for that. So if you use and create a basic UDI-IDI with company prefix, and inside your enterprise, you might have multiple company prefixes, and that can happen multiple ways. Maybe you have acquired a different company and keep on doing business with that particular company prefix, or and it's very possible that you might have allocated only 10 item reference numbers, and now your company has 100 different products, so you had to go back and get another company prefix. So I'm not aware of any requirement. So the answer there, that as I understand it, inside one basic UDI-IDI, you can have multiple GS1 company prefixes. All right, Ronald, are you aware of anything different than that?
No, but I have to be honest there, I'm not very familiar with how GS1 does that, because that's between the GS1 and their clients, and I'm not involved in that.
Yeah. All right, next.
This one's another kind of long one, so bear with me here. There's a procedure pack with 2 CE marked medical devices. Only one of them is CE marked according to MDR. There's a basic UDI/DI assigned. Is a new basic UDI/DI required if the second medical device is CE marked under MDR?
Oh, that's a good question. No, again, look at the hierarchy of these UDIs, right? So you have an MDR device. Okay, that has its own basic UDI, and you have an MDD device which does not have a UDI. It may have a UDAMED DI, UDAMED ID, but it's not a basic UDI there. So they are combined in one procedure pack. Now this procedure pack will have its own basic UDI describing the procedure pack. At the moment, the labeling of the device changes because a UDI is added. It does not change the device, the functionality of the device. So it's not necessary. It's not changing the basic UDI of the procedure pack. However, there is a change in the device, so that would justify a change in the UDI on the package of the procedure pack. So so that's something to keep in mind. So you have a change in the labeling because the one device is updated from MDD to MDR. That means the device changes in labeling, and that means that you have a different there's a different type of how should I say, different labeling entity in the procedure pack. So the UDI/DI must be updated, but not the basic UDI.
So I think this scenario, I'm trying to visualize this. It sounds like they're talking about a procedure pack that has 2 devices. One is compliant with the MDR, and the other is a legacy device under a directive. So, but both are CE marked. And then at some point in time, the legacy device under the directive becomes MDR compliant. And I think the answer then is that the basic UDI does not need to change. You're able to make that change and not.
Yes.
Okay, that's an interesting scenario, and it probably will happen in real life for other frequent.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sure. Yeah.
All right, very cool. Sam, do you have another one?
I do. They keep coming in. Honestly, I'm I'm struggling a little to keep up with everybody, so this is awesome.
That's good.
This question maybe is for you, Gary. Do we only have to show the basic UDI/DI on the IFU for class 3 products only?
Yeah, that's the way I read the regulation. It specifically mentions it there. I don't think it would be an error to add it for the other products, but there is only the requirement for this class 3 in implantables.
I'm not sure about that. It's the UDI is on the labeling and the instructions for use. That, of course, basic UDI should not be there, but it can be used on the periodic safety update report and the summary of safety and clinical performance, because that is linked to the basic UDI of the devices, so the device family. So there you're talking about something that is device family related and not individual devices. So on the periodic safety update report, summary of safety clinical performance, they are not at device level unless there's a very good reason to do so. But they're typically covering a whole family, whole device family.
So are you suggesting that it would be a good practice to go ahead and include the basic UDI in the IFU anyway?
No, don't. There's no place for it. No, the basic UDI should be used in your text file and in the communication with the authorities when you're talking about the whole group.
Right.
Because at the moment the basic UDI is there and something is wrong with that particular intended purpose, it might have an effect on all the devices that don't have that problem. So if you keep the basic UDI out of sight of the public, that's better, right? So don't use it unless for these particular reasons, like the summary of safety, clinical performance, and the implant card, maybe. Well, oh no, implant cards also no, implant cards also UDI, not basic UDI. Sorry.
Right. So here's another long one. So let me know if I need to go back and reiterate anything. So this one says, we have a class 3 implantable device we are submitting for CE marking under EU MDR. It is part of a system that includes surgical instruments and software. All of the components other than the implant are class 1 devices. Our plan is to create a basic UDI DI for the entire system, then a UDI DI for each separate component. Is that a valid approach?
Okay. What was the approach? Sorry, the last sentence. I was making notes. Sorry.
Sure, I know it's a doozy.
Yeah.
Our plan is to create a basic UDI DI for the entire system, then a UDI DI for each separate component. Is that a valid approach?
Yes. Well, each device needs to have its own basic UDI, and then its own UDI DI. And if you have a system, yes, then you need to have this system basic UDI and system UDI, as I mentioned earlier. So you need to have this hierarchy in UDIs. I was a bit confused by software being in class 1 because that's a rare thing nowadays under MDR, software in class 1, but probably have figured it out. I mean, software that is used as an accessory can be in class 1. Otherwise, it will at least be class 2A. But so be careful with that. But yes, you can have every device with its own UDI, its own basic UDI, its own UDI DI, and then combine them in one system. So the system is described as a system under one basic UDI. So you need to have this system description, and you can make that link to the system in UDAMED if you are entering the data according to class Article 22 in UDAMED as a system and procedure pack producer.
So this has an interesting twist where they talk about a system that includes a class 3 implantable. It also includes some class 1 devices. So one of the common attributes of a particular basic UDI DI is that the risk class all be the same. So now if you're talking about the individual devices, since one is a class 3 and the other is a class 1, at the individual level, if you also marketed those items on their own, they, as I understand it, they would have to have their own basic UDI because the classes are different. But if you are combining them and marking them only as a system, then as I understand it, the highest risk device, in this case the class 3, would determine the class of the overall system, and then so there'd be like one entity inside this basic UDI DI. Am I going down the right road there, Ronald?
Well, you can. What sometimes happens is that you have a set of components used together, and so that's working as a system.
Mm-hmm.
But they're placed on the market as one product, as one device.
Yeah, that's the
so
important
then you have a system as a device. But if you rely on Article 22, then each device will be within a system or procedure pack. Each device will be labeled and will be assessed individually on its own. And the whole combination does not have a risk class. So a procedure pack or a system does not have a risk class. It's not there. So you can have within a system or within a procedure pack the full range of all risk classes, from class 1 self-certified to class 3 implantable, what have you. It can be in one procedure pack under one basic UDI, one label. That's the fun of Article 22.
Is that also applicable to a system? So one is a procedure pack, the other is the same answer for a system that includes these diverse components.
Yes, yes. So
Yep.
you have
Okay.
like you have like a set of instruments, and you can maybe reuse the set of instruments. Let's assume within this this scenario, you have this reusable set of instruments, so the class 1 reusable, software probably also reusable, and the implant which is for single use, of course. So then you have these different components that they are brought together in the system, and you can have multiple implants implanted by the same instruments and the same software. And so then it's a system. Yes, and that works. It works like that because they are assigned together under the scope of Article 22. There are some details that you need to take care of, but that's a bit too detailed for this webinar. We take till tomorrow to answer this question in full. But yeah.
All right. So rather than taking one question for one day, Sam, what's the next one?
This is another fun scenario. So buckle up. So a life supporting device has two different item numbers with the same design. The difference is only that one device has standard functions only, and the other is customized and has different options. How many basic UDI DI should we use?
I think each component, standard or customized, they're different. So they must have some difference in either in intended purpose or design characteristics. Yeah, well, it depends. It depends. I'm not sure. So they could be these components could have a different intended purpose, and then they need a different basic UDI, or they could have a different UDI under the same intended purpose, under the same basic UDI. I'm not sure. That depends on what happens exactly when it's customized. So yes, it could be a variant within the same device family, under the same basic UDI, to have that component. Now, if you use that component together with a life support system, again, this is a system. So you have the system UDI that you need to apply, and that can be one basic UDI DI and one UDI DI for the system, one basic UDI for the system, and maybe a different UDI, maybe not for the for the system at UDI level. I don't know. That's something that needs to be investigated in detail. So you need to assess that in detail, what exactly is happening at the level of the device. Sorry, I cannot go further into it because I'm missing detail and depth in the scenario.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll move on then. Our next question is, what is the current rule on sizes? What can be done if a pack was designed without basic UDI DI because of insufficient space? At one stage, MDR will be mandatory, i.e. space is missing. What can be done?
Okay, so the package is too small, or the label is too small for the full UDI. Yeah, that's there are some. If you look at Annex 6, there are some options there, so you can go to a higher package level. Sometimes that works, or just enlarge the package size. I've seen some manufacturers just making the label into a small booklet. So you have one page, and if you open that, then you have the full label. There are all sorts of tricks that I see happening now. Yeah, you have to be creative a little bit, but it must be there. The bottom line is that if you have all this information on the label that you need to have, and there's no room, the individual package at the level of use, at the unit of use, so where it's being used, that must be identifiable. So if you have, for example, a box of needles and someone just grabs a needle out and puts it on a syringe, then the needle hardly has room for a large label, but the box has. So at the moment the needle is put into service, so it's taken out of the box, then it's put into service. At that moment, the label is clear. There is clear room for labeling. So those are things that you may try to approach. But yeah, some manufacturers really are really struggling, and I've seen an implant that was a very small screw, and someone attempted to use to put the barcode for the UDI on it, which could be read by a microscope. Yeah, really small, but yeah, that was the only way to get it on. So that's part of one of the research into how to deal with this. It's still ongoing. Europe and the US together are working on that, so that there is one system to deal with that. There's still some open gaps there when it comes to procedure packs for surgical nettings. There's still some issues there that need to be resolved.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I did want to go back to the original question, Sam. I was looking at that, and I think this is simply a typo, but the question says that they are considering, as a result of MDR compliance, adding basic UDI to the label, and they're saying there's insufficient space for that. I did want to make it clear that the basic UDI is never to be applied to the product label. So I think the question is really referring to UDI DI, a standard UDI. So that's one point. The second point I wanted to make is that we've seen, Ronald, some companies make use of a two-dimensional barcode, which is much smaller and dense than a long one-dimensional barcode. So they're able to fit it into smaller spaces, just because the barcode can be a lot smaller. So, there's just a couple additional thoughts there. I've also seen UDI being its own separate label that is applied nearby, and if there's room on the product, you can have your standard label that you've been using for years, and then just add a little supplement label, standalone, applied label nearby. It can't obviously be on the far side or remote from the regular label, but I have seen separate labels. Any other thoughts on this one, or should we move to the next one?
Yeah, no, I agree. The basic UDI should not be on the label. That's correct.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next one, Sam.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Okay, so this question said it's to elaborate on a previous question on the manufacturing characteristics. Does a med device, example instrument, that has the same purpose, same tech file, same risk class, but perhaps has a handle of a different material, is that a different basic UDI DI?
A different material if it's essential, right? Sometimes you have things that are different from a, I should say, cosmetic perspective. Then it can be treated as the same design and production characteristic. But if it's really essential, I had this discussion a few weeks ago with a company that make a device in two variants. One is stainless steel, the other is aluminum, and that results in a different way that the device is used. It is different. And although physically, for the rest, the devices are identical, it's only the material that's different. But no, it's a different basic UDI, and they need to do it in a different way, and so the different UDIs as well.
Gary, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that a lot of times these questions come down to some discretionary decision that in many cases the manufacturer is best able to answer whether or not it's essentially the same do you consider it the same manufacturing practice, same intended use and that sort of thing. So that's why we have these these particular webinars, is to kind of flesh out these gray zones. But ultimately, the manufacturer has to make the decision there, and sometimes you might get some help from a notified body, because ultimately they're going to review that decision that you made. So anyway, we can take the next one.
Okay. We have two device models, A and B. A is intended for pediatrics and B is for adults. Can both share the same basic UDI/DI?
I think the answer is in the word intended. It's a different intended use. They should be used. They should have a different basic UDI. Pediatric or adults, that can be there can be some really big differences in terms of post-market surveillance, in terms of post-marketing follow-up, those things. So you may be mixing up data, and especially if you talk about pediatrics, very often the numbers are smaller than for adults, so that means that any statistically relevant things for children are sort of smoothed away because of the higher frequencies that you see, because there are many more devices for adults. So it's something to be very careful about. I think it looks like a different intended purpose. And probably also there might also be some design characteristic. I would go for safe and create different basic UDIs.
Perfect. I think we have time for one more question before we move on to next steps. This one is also a little complicated. So buckle up. We have surgical instruments that are part of a procedure pack. Each instrument is packaged separately, but they're all sold together as a procedure pack. Does each individual package require a PKG/DI? And how is the PKG/DI different than the UDI/DI?
PKG/DI, that's a new term. Gary, are you aware?
Oh, yeah, I've used that as kind of a little short abbreviation for package device identifier. So a package device identifier is part of a package level and part of a hierarchy. So you have a base product, which has a basic, a UDI/DI, but then GS1 guidelines say that it's recommended that you assign another device identifier for each of the higher levels. So, in my example that we used earlier, I think I had four forceps or two forceps in a pouch, and then I put two pouches in a box, or I forget the exact scenario. But when you create a higher level, you have to have a different device identifier. And some companies, and it's okay to do this, but it's not preferred, they change the item reference number in the GS1 standard, and that technically works. But the recommendation from GS1 is that you keep the very same item reference number, but you change the very first digit, the indicator digit, when you go to a higher packaging level. And then obviously the check digit will change. And that provides a little bit of information in that particular G10. So you can look at it and say, oh, well, this is probably all the very same family. I see the indicator digit is changing. This tells me that I have different packaging levels. So I think that would be the scenario here. And where you have products that are in a packaging hierarchy, you do have to create a different DI, but the recommendation is that those higher packaging DIs have the same item reference, change the indicator digit. So anything else that you wanted to add to that, Ronald?
Yeah, I think the question is about the devices being packaged individually. So, and then in a procedure pack. So they're packaged individually and they may have higher package hierarchy in packaging. But still, it will be the same device under the same basic UDI of the device. But if you put them together in a procedure pack, see Article 22, then you need to have this for the pack, the procedure pack. You need to have this procedure pack basic UDI, and on the label of the procedure pack, the procedure pack UDI. And I've seen. I've now worked with a company, and they had sort of small procedure packs that were put together in larger procedure packs. So you have this hierarchy of procedure pack UDIs that link different procedure packs together. If you look at first aid kits, sometimes you have that in first aid kits, that you have a hierarchy of basic of procedure packs within a procedure pack. And it can be done, no problem. And you can add, you have devices with procedure packs and software and whatever, and just systems and the whole thing. Yeah, it can be done, but you need to understand what you need, what you're doing. So, yeah, hopefully that answers this question.
I did want to go back to what I was referring to about packaging level. I think I misunderstood the question. If there's different devices that are part of a procedure pack, then that is not considered a hierarchy. You actually have a different device because it's a different model or version. Then you do in fact need to have a different item reference number in your G10. So it's a it would create a whole different DI. You would not be able to accommodate that through a indicator digit. So different devices need different device identifiers. So I think that's maybe all the time that we have. Sam, do you have it? Let's see, we have a couple minutes here. There's a couple takeaways that I think we want to touch on. Let me start sharing this screen here. Did that come through, Sam?
It did.
For the next steps? All right.
Yep.
So there are some things that you should take away from this conversation. What should manufacturers do now? And especially regarding our focus on basic UDI/DI, certainly understand the rules. It looks like the audience is down in the weeds and starting to figure this out. So you should be definitely doing that. If you haven't started, let's start that yesterday and get that underway. Figure out the granularity of and the scoping of your basic UDI. There are some basic principles that you need to follow, but work your way through your portfolio, build those basic UDI groups, and then make sure that they meet all the requirements. And then you need to go and actually create the values, put them in some kind of a structured fashion. And start collecting and cleansing those attributes that are associated with that basic UDI. We here at RETAC offer a platform where you can collect that information in some either spreadsheets, or you can load it into our system. We do some validation, make sure the cleansing of all those attributes is in fact correct. And then obviously when you're preparing for your notified body review, make sure those technical documents and everything's in place. The second takeaway is, what should you do in the future? Ronald, do you want to touch on a couple things here about the upcoming deadline? Sure. Less than a year away.
Yes, we have now this regulation 2023/607, which is called the extension regulation, but it is not for manufacturers. It's not for the extension is not for manufacturers, only for notified bodies. They have more time to take care of their certification work. Manufacturers must comply by 26 May 2024. That's 8 months from now, less than 8 months from now. Really, that's just over, what is it, 32 weeks. That's basically tomorrow. So then you need to be ready. You need to have an agreement, well, an application in with a notified body, an agreement by September next year around this time. So yeah, and to do that, you need to have your basic UDI structure ready. And you must have your technical documentation ready. So if you don't have your your basic UDI structure in good order, it will only pop up at the moment the notified body starts reviewing. So you better make sure you have your basic UDI structure in good order, including any Article 22 structures, because that is about how your device is going to be used. Now, if you can go to UDI and already start registering. So registering yourself as an economic operator, maybe as a manufacturer only, maybe also as an Article 22 system and procedure pack producer. You can go to the device module and register your device already. Start in the playground, that you can sort of practice, and then go for real production. And there's now some rumors that the period when UDI becomes applicable will move even further. I don't know. It's not sure, but for now it's on. It's Q4 of 2024, so in just over a year that UDI will become applicable, and then you have 2 years to get all the data in officially. I suggest start working on it now so you can build routine. And of course, you need to keep maintaining your basic UDI and UDI structure. So keep going back to that. Is it still valid? Is it still correct? Or do I need to split up things, or can I delete items? Those things. So you need to look into that. It will require a lot of work. But if you do your UDI correct, if you do it well, it will help a lot in making notified bodies navigate through your documentation. It will make life easier if you do it well. That's all. Thank you.
Very good. Sam, I'm going to turn this back to you. Why don't I see we're at the hour, so why don't you close us out? Where do we find more information about RETEC and Boumans regulatory?
Yes, as you see, you can find us at our website. You can join us on social, reach out to me directly with any questions. We had an overwhelming response to our question and answer period, so I will be sending out responses. We will be responding to people that we did not make in the presentation. Thank you so much. And then post webinar, I will be sending out the slides and the recording. So if you missed something, then it'll all be there for you. And then here's the Boumans contact information. So thank you so much. Thank you, Ronald. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you all for the questions. It was interesting.
Yeah.